everyone. So my name's Kristy and I'm a lecturer in forensic psychology at the University of Bedfordshire. So I'm just going to give you a little sort of run through of forensic psychology, the courses that we offer, and the subject generally, really. So forensic psychology, when we mean forensic psychology, we're talking about lots of different things to do with crime and criminals. So what I've done is I've listed on the slides for you the sorts of things that we will teach you about in our forensic psychology degree pathways. So we will talk about things to do with why people commit crime. So why would anybody commit a crime? Why does certain types of people commit certain types of crimes? So obviously we know generally why people commit crime, but we also know that there are certain things about particular people that might make them more or even less likely to commit particular types of crimes. So we're really interested in that. We're interested in things to do with the legal system as well. So we're really interested in things like if you witness a crime, which would make you an eyewitness, or if you're the victim of a crime, you could be an eyewitness as well. We would be interested in things like, well, how do we work with the police to get the most accurate account of that crime out of you? So you might think, oh, well, you see something and then you remember it. And then that means that when you tell the police, it's you just sort of replay the memory in your head like a video camera. And if you do it nice and quickly, there shouldn't be a problem. But really, memory is reconstructive. So if you think of any memories that you have, you might think that they play like a video in your head. But what's actually happening is that each time you recall a memory, you are sort of piecing it back together. So that's fine normally, and people are pretty accurate. But when we're talking about crime and we're talking about people who have experienced trauma or you've been a victim of crime, those memories can become quite inaccurate. So where you have police officers that will just go in and say, tell me what happened, what did you see, etc., we would be interested in saying, okay, well, given what we know about memory, how can we ask questions in the best way to get the most accurate testimony? And then when it comes to lineups as well, we're interested in, how should we show people in the lineup? So if someone has a tattoo on their face, for example, one of the suspects, should we tell the witness to ignore it, or should we replicate it across the other suspects? So I don't mean should we tattoo their faces, I mean should we superimpose a fake tattoo onto their faces? So stuff to do with the legal system, and especially to do with police practice. So we know that people falsely confess to crimes. So why would somebody falsely confess? Obviously, normally when I say this to people, they're like, well, that's crazy. Why would you confess to a crime you didn't commit? But actually, it's not as unusual as we would think it is. So people falsely confess for lots of different reasons, but there are a lot of things that the police can do when interviewing witnesses, suspects, to limit the chance of that false confession. Then we talk about juries, so things happening in the courtroom. So this might be, well, if you're on a jury, how do you make decisions? So when the jury are sent to deliberate after a court case, we're not allowed to ever film or witness what goes on in that room. So we just have to guess. Or obviously we try not to guess. We try and we make fake juries and we do research on them. But really what we want to know is, how do they make choices? So if you've got one really overbearing person in a jury and then one who's a bit more meek and they've got opposing ideas, surely the overbearing person's idea is going to win. And is that the case? And how do we mitigate that? Because the loudest and the most confident people are not always the correct people. So confidence doesn't equal accuracy. So we're really interested in sort of the criminal from the very beginning. So before they commit the crime. What is it about them that led them to commit the crime? And then as they move through the legal system, and then starting to bring in those other elements like the eyewitnesses, the police interviewing, profiling, investigative techniques, how they're caught. So they're moving through the legal system. And then we're really interested in what happens afterwards as well. So when we're talking about the sentencing, the punishment phase, what do we do with somebody? So we've convicted somebody of a crime. Well, what should we do with them? Okay, well, we could send them to prison, or we could not. We could do something else. We could put them on tag. We could give them community service, etc., etc. But if we're deciding whether or not to send someone to prison, what would be the benefit of sending somebody to prison? What's the potential impact of sending somebody to prison? And could we rehabilitate that person? And if so, what treatment should we give them? What should we do with them in prison? What should we do with them in the community? What are their needs to ultimately stop them from committing crime again, is really what we're trying to do. So that's obviously always a source of debate, because a lot of people will say like, oh, just throw away the key. Really, it costs about 30 grand a year to keep somebody in prison. So throwing away the key is really expensive. So we're not super keen to do that. It'd be much nicer if you could sort of bang them up for a couple of years, treat them and make them not commit crime, and then let them out. So that's a really interesting one from a public viewpoint as well. So we like to follow the whole journey. So we are really following from pre-crime, you know, the reasons behind the crime, the journey through the justice system. And that's not just for the offender, that would be for the victims as well, and their families. And then afterwards, so in prison or the punishment, what is it? What's the purpose? What are we doing that for? So at Beds, we've got two different courses. So our undergraduate course is psychology and criminal behaviour. So that's the one where we look at exactly what I've just said, the areas we just talked about. And we look at those across the first, second, third year, alongside units of sort of more general psychology. You need the more general psychology to underpin the knowledge of the to be able to get the theories and the knowledge that you can then apply to forensic psychology, and prison populations and mental health populations, etc. So for our undergraduates, we don't have specific requirements, so you don't have to study psychology at A level or anything like that, but we just ask that you have GCSE English. We did recently, I think, drop the requirement for GCSE maths, but again, having that would be beneficial because there are some statistics involved. Don't let that put you off. It's not a lot, and statistics and maths are very different anyway. So 3 A levels, sort of C grade, D grade would be perfect. Obviously, you can contact admissions for specific information about that. And then we've got a master's in forensic psychology. So that is for once you've done your undergraduate degree, if you thought, oh, I really like forensic psychology, maybe I want to be a forensic psychologist, that master's is there to get you on the way to doing that. And again, there aren't really any requirements for that. So it doesn't have to be just if you've done your undergrad with us, you can do your undergrad somewhere else and do your MSc at Beds. As long as you have a sort of 2.2 or a 2.1 or above, then you're absolutely fine. And I have just put a little bit on the slides about the sort of work that you could expect to go into. So really, psychology graduates do all sorts of things. You get a lot of transferable skills from psychology. So anything to do with working with people, managing people. So that might be in something like human resources, customer service, or you might want to work with mental health or offender populations. So you might be thinking about working with young offenders or ex-offenders or offenders with addiction, so you might want to work in sort of alcohol or substance abuse settings. So there are lots and lots of things you can do, as well as obviously work for the police. So that might be as a police officer, because that would give you a nice background. Or it might be in a civilian role, so maybe something to do with investigating or interviewing. Obviously, you could work as a forensic psychologist, so you could work for the prison service. That's where they're mostly employed, but I think the NHS employ a few as well. So there's a lot of stuff to do. So either sort of with offenders, using that forensic psychology information, or with the working with the general population, just in anything that requires working with people. Psychology gives you a lot of those people skills that employers tend to like. So I've also just put a bit about to gain more experience. So obviously people think that the degree is that's all you need. So if you want to get the job, the degree is the be all and end all, but actually that's not quite the case. So really you want to have the degree, and then you want to do a little bit of work experience as well. So this could be paid or unpaid, but there's lots of opportunities for voluntary experience, and these would be things like working with offenders. So this might be young offenders. There's voluntary experience in prison, independent monitoring in prison, so you can give that a Google. With mental health charities, obviously at the minute perhaps not taking on volunteers, but really the sooner people start volunteering the better, because it just gives you that applied experience that's going to look really, really good in job applications. So that's pretty much it from me. Thanks everyone for listening, and I do hope you have a good evening.